All right, everyone, welcome to the AccountDads, the podcast for the finance and accounting leaders, strategizers, thinkers, and doers. And a couple of episodes ago, we asked a question and we spoke about the ongoing battle between the operations of the business and the finance teams of the business. Now, Ash, you put a question on the group chat. You said you cannot business partner from a spreadsheet if you do not understand what happens on the floor. And then you had a mic drop gif. Tell us about this and tell us about what you mean by that and why this frustrates you.
Actually, that's a good point. I've done a Zoom where. Yeah, I think, look, it's going to be a great episode. I think what happened is we're trying to address one of the largest gaps that we see in finance, where people have moved into commercial roles. We can explain the numbers. We can't always figure out why operations have created them. We can see the shift in the P&L where we don't understand what that true drive is. Is it labor, waste, stock, But yeah, I think what you guys will find really interesting is like how we had to learn from these behaviors and basically our lived experiences from this, and then what our foundations were to get this into actually reality. So it's all well and good to read about it once again and come back and say, hey, I'm a finance business partner, but what did we actually live through to get there? So Kev, The main point is the P&L is in operations, but what's the dollar impact of that?
Yeah. So just as a caveat before we kick off, Ash, we've got experience across a couple of industries. So construction, manufacturing, professional services, engineering,
Waste,
FMCG, waste. And so a couple of the examples we give come from that world. So if you're listening and you are from that world, then hopefully you find this useful. So the first question you asked, Ash, is the P&L is operations in dollars. Essentially, it is a story told through numbers for the business. And I think that's important for us as finance people to understand, right? P&L isn't just a bunch of spreadsheets. It isn't, a large calculator being shown just because that's what we need to do as finance people. It's actually telling the story of what the business has done in a particular period. And when you're doing your forecasts and your budgets, you're trying to predict the story that's going to happen. And I think that's important for us to think about, Ash. And so a question that we can ask ourselves is what type of behaviors, what type of answers, and what type of stories would you eventually see in the numbers when it's completely clean? And now I add that caveat as completely clean because there's obviously messy numbers that sometimes don't tell the story of a business. So what do you reckon, Ash? Do you reckon we can address to the audience the types of behaviors or the stories that eventually show up in these numbers?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, but we've got to really unpack the why, like you're saying, right? So it comes back down to understanding the history, what occurred during that time, and what's driving that number for this year. And is it even comparable, right, for your sense? So, because it's all well and good to do a rolling forecast and adjust it by CPI and say, oh, well, Tuesday last year did this number and we're going to increase it by this. But if there's a one-off event that we don't know about and 12 months later we're trying to figure that out, everything can just go completely wacky, right? So it's really good to explain the why.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, if everyone's just wondering why Ash is speaking so softly, it isn't because he's shy. We do actually have sleeping kids, and so that's one of the reasons we are A, called the AccountDads, B, we speak softly at this time of night. But Ash, P&L operations in dollars, let's go through a couple of P&L line items, right? And let's talk about the story that could potentially tell for a business owner or a finance team and how we can translate this story of being operations in dollars. So let's just say a labor cost line, Ash, for a construction company, for a manufacturing company, for a lot of companies, actually even professional services to an extent where you're charging out your labor of an accountant or something to a customer. We just see that sometimes as salaries and wages, or we see that as a cost line. Really, many businesses and industries look at that as a reflection of revenue. And the flip side of that is the utilization of that labor cost towards earning revenue. Give us an example, Ash. Do you have an example of that in a place that you've worked at or an industry that you've been a part of?
Oh, multiple industries. So we've got examples where if it's labor based, we've been checking contractual hours go through. We didn't understand the clients, to understand the actual mix of things that we're going through. We've tried to understand things like, let's say, supplier impacts and what the seasonality of those items were. How about
Yeah.
yourself?
Yeah, I think we had a recent example actually, where we noticed margins going down in a particular month, and the easy, I guess, narrative or story that you'd see in a finance report is, oh, our margins dropped in a particular month, and that'd get everyone tearing their hair out, thinking, how did we drop margins in a month? Did our cost creep up? Like, what's the story? Did a deep dive and we realized actually there's been a lot of leave taken that month. And the way our rates had been built, the way our budgets had been built, we had a certain percentage of leave banked on being taken over a particular couple of months. We obviously kept over that, which is natural. It happens in business, particularly during periods like school holidays, public holidays, and things like that. And so that in turn dropped your utilizable labor, dropped your revenue, and it meant you were having less revenue to absorb your overheads. And so it was an easy story to tell once you actually look down deep in the detail. And sometimes you tell the story and there isn't really a solution that you can give off the back of it, rather other than just say, this is what happened. So this is one of those instances.
Yeah, 100%. Did you find out that have those long lead times? How did you actually find that out? Was that going back to your systems, trying to figure out what actually generated that revenue, or was it some KPI ratios that you were looking at? What was the actual driver?
Yeah, sorry, I said leave. So leave,
Oh, lead. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
we actually just looked at, like, we've been building out this utilization report, and we just looked at the spread of hours of customers, and we saw actually
Gotcha.
we usually have many more hours, and
Yeah.
turns
Yeah.
out there was a lot of leave taken, and
Yes,
it's just
that's right.
natural that you can't charge that leave out, and as
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
result of
Yeah.
it, we had to absorb it as a business.
No, that's interesting. If I bring lead back into it as well, in FMCG world, as you can imagine, during periods of, let's say, school holidays and all those items where you can sort of expect seasonal uplifts in sales. So you're
Mm.
almost making your calendar around, well, when was the school holidays last year versus when is it this year based on states? And if something shifts by
Yeah,
a week, then all of a sudden you come back and say, oh, well, your week to week comparative is also it's not there. So we need to almost shift the dial as well and come back and say, and we look at the right timing comparative to
yeah,
understand, is the business truly growing or is it
yeah,
not growing? Right. And so I think that was
yeah,
really interesting just to see that because the first time I've seen that shift happen.
yeah. That's a great call. So we're talking about labor costs. We obviously ultimately all of these costs and line items affect margin.
Right.
Um, Margin can be affected by a couple of other factors too, Ash. I think you
Yeah.
were mentioning a couple of great stories in the waste world or in some couple of the industries you worked with. Give us another example.
Yeah, sure thing. So basically, if you look at any of the services industries, we use other companies to derive products from. So I think what's interesting is in a P&L item, you see revenue and COGS generally to get to your profit.
Mm.
And that explanation of profit's actually a tough one because we just come back and say, oh, let's say it's, I don't know, 20% or 30%. And month on month, you try to explain a number. And if it's green or red versus your budget or forecast, everything's all good. But the why was really interesting. So I think
Mm.
we tried to really understand what changed from this month to last month, or even this month to last year. And we figured out, hey, do we sell the same suppliers in the books? Did we renegotiate contracts? Did we do some promotional campaign, or like what was the go here? So I think that's what then started truly letting us understand what's actually happening with the business. Are these sort of more one-offs, and can we expect
Mm.
higher, or hey, we've actually set the new ceiling and now we'll actually flow from here. So understanding the supplier mix, the product mix, what's selling, what's not selling. Let's say if it's bins, the sales guys had a really interesting tactic where they'd, price some bins really high and some bins really low, the ones they knew they were going to be sold just to get through the RFPs. So you just had some real tactics. And when you're trying to look at the mix of bins, you're like, wait a second, why is it per cubic meter of this bin way cheaper than this one? You're like, oh,
Yeah,
that's the one the client needs. Okay, here we go. and
yeah,
so then so that's when you start understanding, like, well, the client can clearly see one bin's superiorly priced. We're just going to keep hitting that one bin over and over again. Like, okay, here
mm.
we go. So, it was just good to see that. And what what strategies people thought they were executing and what the reality of that was as well, without getting their finance head in space.
Yeah. So actually, you talk about that bin story. I was
Mm.
reading on SaaS pricing as well. If
Uh-huh.
you go to an app or you sign up to like a subscription model, they'll usually have three tiers of pricing,
Mm.
and they'll have pricing that looks very unattractive, a pricing that
Mm.
looks low but doesn't have all the features. And there'll be a golden egg pricing, which is
Mm.
essentially feels like it's in the middle, but it's not really. It's more towards the higher end, but then you have all the
Yeah.
features, but it's slightly
Mm.
lower. They were talking about the psychology of how
Yeah.
a lot of these
Yeah.
apps and subscription models have set it up that way. And now it's
Mm.
almost coached that every subscription model is set up that way.
Yeah.
And those businesses target and build their margins off the base of that pricing tier. So
Yeah.
similar concept, different industries, which is really interesting to think about.
Yeah.
Inventory issues, Ash.
Yep.
You said inventory issues can reflect forecasting, process control, or service priorities. Now, inventory is probably a big thing in FMCG,
Mhm.
in manufacturing as well. Any call outs there?
Yeah, I think it's once again understanding things like anything major from, let's say, competitor strikes or industrial actions. You've got shortages. So, with, let's say, the egg shortage, we have some of the flus, the bird flus and stuff that were going around, created mass
Mm.
shortages. Do you remember during COVID, Kev, when lettuce was not around and you
Yeah.
bought put one head of lettuce, I think stuck it into your food for some reason.
My fried rice.
Via fried rice with $12 lettuce. And so there was a really understanding like what's going on and what was then driving the price behind stuff as well.
Mm.
So, and then finally was just regarding if there's any shortages or actual just changes in supplier as well, which sometimes I think can cause disruption. So what actually occurred to explain the numbers in our P&L. So I think
Mm.
that was something that's really interesting. And once again, when you just see say a spreadsheet full of numbers and then you increment another month without having that right commentary in place, it's
Yeah.
very hard to recall that.
Yeah. That's a good point. And ultimately, it comes back to that first point we raised. Some of these things just tell the business a story in numbers so they can make a decision off the back of this, react
Mm.
to it, or at least plan for it going forward. And ultimately, this is a good business partnering skill, isn't it, Ash?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. So I think it's basically what we're trying to do is become that operational chain behind that number, right?
Mm.
So that's the most critical part. And once you can recall, imagine your finance commentary now. It's got so much more substance and so much more depth
Mm.
rather than, hey, mate, it's 2% up or 2% down. We've
Yeah.
got no idea why, but that's what we've been told.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's get to our second point, Ash. So I'll tell you a story to kick off our second point. I was called in by the CEO of a business to build out this operational and finance dashboard and did that. They called the GMs in from the number of other businesses, and one of the GMs walked in. The CEO kind of made me present the numbers, and I could see the GM was very dismissive. And after the meeting, the GM, who I was good friends with, said, "I don't need you to tell me the numbers about my business.
Mm,
Those numbers are wrong anyway," kind of thing. And it begged me to question, which
yeah.
comes to our second point: why do operations ignore finance numbers or commentary?
Oh, that's a, that's a super touchy, but yeah, great. I think finance always turn up after everything's done, right? Like,
Mm.
can you comment on, let's say right now, where we're in a particular month, can you comment on last month's number? We're already halfway through, if not towards the month end of the following month.
Yeah,
And it's like, oh, can you tell me about the reflection of the past? They're already living in the future. I think we're looking too far in the backwards area now
yeah,
for them to actually change anything from a needle point of view. So there was always like just relevance is probably
yeah,
the main
yeah,
point.
yeah. I think as well, at times there's a lot of noise in that sits in finance numbers, which when I say noise, I'm not saying this is bad noise, but
Mm,
there's things like accruals, accrued income,
mm,
accrued expenses, and sometimes, the leaders actually have no visibility beyond what revenue has been built, which
yeah,
is the
yeah,
target that they're kind of pinged upon, right? And
yeah,
so you're asking them to comment on numbers that they actually don't know what's happening beneath the hood. So that's
mm,
probably part of the reason as well why they feel a bit disconnected.
yeah,
Do you reckon there's any
100%.
other reasons they might feel disconnected?
I think it's it's just a translation of what they're trying to explain. So you're saying outside, let's say revenue, like you're saying after accruals, it's they're not even speaking the same language almost,
Mm,
right? Because let's say you got a project that you're trying to deliver on, you've got various milestones. Finance will find a way to translate those milestones into that's something that's relevant for them. And
yeah.
how do you, let's say, meet a AASB standard rather than what's actually happening on the coal face, right? And I
Mm,
think that's what's really challenging. And that's why a lot of people just carry their own spreadsheets, right? One of
yeah.
these ops figure goes, well, I know exactly what I've built and I know exactly what the project's up to. I'm not going to rely on some random finance number because you're not helping me out, right? So,
Mm,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah. I think that's the challenge that a lot of new accountants will have, and also finance leaders. And,
Mm.
I think we always encourage people in this podcast to be diplomatic when they're addressing some of these issues, because it's natural for us to feel like, oh, well, actually, I know more than you, so I'm going to come at you just as hard. But it's important for us, right? We need to build relationship. Who
Mm.
cares if they think we're wrong? Let's take them on the journey, and
Yep.
we might
Yep.
learn something from that instance as
Exactly.
well. And like we've said, we want to earn trust, and if we're going to challenge them, we want to do that in a way that's a bit loving.
Mm.
As you said that an organization highlights something about business partnering. What is this organization and what are they highlighting?
Well, the organization is the Institute of Chartered Accountants.
Uh,
But basically, if we apply that, we're the three of us, or two of us today. We're all chartered accountants. We've all got a professional qualification. But outside that, what we've seen is the recent trend of the fact that business partners actually do need to exist, and we do need
mm,
to. When they say business partners, it's not business just finance forcing. It's actually partnering. So really, what you're trying to do is just translate and understand what everyone's trying to get to. And if you can get that alignment, you're literally going to get way further in life and actually add value, right? Rather than
yeah.
trying to make value out of nothing.
Mm,
Like I think, Kev, what's one of the terms we've heard? You can't polish a turd.
yeah.
This is just a fresh. This is fresh for the accountants. But you can roll it in glitter.
Yeah.
So a shiny turd is not the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the main thing. So I think what you're going to come back and say, hey, what are we trying to do? And at the end of the day, you're generally there to either grow your business or trying to optimize cost or is there any other efficiency. Now, if finance come through and say, oh, you know what, we can actually do your job better than you as operations people.
Mm,
That's where it becomes a bit standoffish, doesn't it? It's more just
yeah.
like, hey, look, we're just here to look and observe, and if we can maybe optimize a thing or two, or ask some questions, or just say, have some food for thought, that'd be great for us, right? We get to learn,
Yeah.
you get to learn. We're both on the same page. We actually still know what the end goal is. Let's tick it off together.
Yeah.
So,
It's a good way to round out the second point. So the first point we had, we need to understand and communicate that the P&L is operations in dollars. We need to tell the story in the form of numbers. Our second point was how to connect the dots between operations and finance, and not to create a rift, but to build
mhm.
bridges. And I think the third point, Ash, is what we were talking about, it, not just sitting on our seats with, not just sitting on our hands, so to speak. We want to be able to be in the business and learn the business properly. So how can a finance person learn the operations of a business or understand the business when they're so busy during month end, when they're so busy cleaning up balance sheets during the rest of the month, and they're so busy doing audit and they're so busy doing cleanup work? How can they do it, Ash?
So busy doing stuff. So what's the account dad's approach? Look, for me personally, I do like to sit down with people. So I figure out who my stakeholders are firstly,
Mm,
and just like to sit around them. So more recently, I've got a team of six, and it was really interesting where like the business partners sort of just hover around me when I was like, actually go away and sit with your own respective business, functions. But if you go back a few roles, if I had to put myself in a different stream, whereas in the waste industry, I was only the only business partner that was sitting with the operations guys, and the rest of the
mm,
finance staff were sitting downstairs within themselves. But I got
yeah.
exposed to all the conversations. I got exposed to being brought into meetings randomly.
Mm,
I got a, oh, hey, this is my current problem. Whereas I'm like, oh, I'm experiencing this like here and now. Whereas in P&L world, I would have been asking the same question about a month and a half from now about what actually occurred today. And
Yeah.
so the timing of conversation really is what really got me.
Mm,
And so for me, it was just trying to be present around people. Um, Given a world pre-COVID and post-COVID is a bit different, but obviously the more
mm,
present you can be, it's easier. And just asking people, just being curious. And I think most people, they want to help. No one's generally standoffish, I think, at the beginning,
mm.
unless they've had some history of the past, let's say between finance and ops. But most people want to help. But if they just see you're curious in nature and just want to actually help out with no other strings attached,
Mm,
they'll take you on the ride. They'll take you on the journey, right? And
yeah,
they're more than happy to go, oh, well, this is how we see the world, rather than, hey, this is your backwards, view of the rear view facing of the world as such.
yeah. It's a great point, and I'm going to go to a rugby league analogy. Why do like the New South Wales Blues bring players that haven't made the team still into camp?
Mm,
They want them to feel and understand what it's like to be a part of that team. They want them to build context. They want them to build relationships, camaraderie, but also for them to have perspective. And even though this isn't the same as that, it just goes to show being around people or being around teams, being around the actual business that's delivering revenue helps you understand and build context and adds value to your work as well. And hopefully through that helps you do your work better.
mm,
And so, yeah, like you said, Ash, the practical ways are to be present, sit with those teams, attend those meetings. If you're not being invited to meetings, ask. I think the more you talk to people, even if you ask, some of the junior guys, hey, can I come? You're in a meeting with three junior guys. Can I just come and sit in that?
mm,
They might be like, oh, wow, the finance guy wants to come to our meeting. All
yeah,
we're talking about is how do we clean this particular thing up? But at least start to build perspective, right? You building blocks of understanding that industry and that business. Another point you have, Ash, is understanding the KPIs that drive certain leaders or
yeah,
business people, so you can understand, what their drivers are and what they
100%.
are focused on in pushing the business towards. Any other points, Ash, in terms of practicality that we can capture?
I think the final thing is like just understanding from their perspective, like why that, the KPI point is important to them. And so if we
Mm,
understand the importance for them, then we can actually bridge the gap why it's going to be important to us. So we'll come back to the example, like, well, even more recently. So two things. So when I was having a chat with one of the directors, and they said, "Oh, we get an update, every 4 weeks on this." Well, who turns up to the updates? Oh, pretty much that whole division. I'm like, do you mind if we turn up? Oh, that's no problem with that. All right, cool. But there wasn't an open invite, right? It was like
yeah,
a
yeah,
just asking the question. And the second part was when I was trying to, act between, let's say, a conduit between finance and operations.
mm,
I'd send a couple of business partners down, and all they're trying to do is just shove the finance P&L world of the world down. And then when I
yeah,
asked the operations guy, what's going on here? It's like, I've never seen these numbers before in my life, and yet you're asking me for P&L commentary. I'm like, that's valid. I'm like, what do you do? Well, it's like, I submit a bunch of different numbers. Who gave you those numbers? Oh, me and his, like, their boss worked on them. Well, okay,
mm,
that's probably relevant to you. We can probably leverage most of that. There's probably a
mm,
little bit off. So how about we just, take the like the easiest way out. You do your
yeah,
stuff, we'll do our stuff. I'll join the dots in the middle.
mm,
Everyone wins. It's like,
yeah,
and the first response was, "You can do that." Like, yeah, because we understand enough about it, right? So,
yeah,
and I think
yeah,
that was the main thing for us. It's just literally trying to join the dots, but figure out like, hey, everyone's got a role to play, and
mm,
if you do the end-to-end walkthrough of a business, you figure out which parties and which teams get involved at what stage.
yeah,
And that's when you figured out and everyone is so intertwined. And if you can
mm,
actually appreciate that part, that's when you'll get a lot further, I think, in your business partnering journey, because it's not siloed business partnering here. It's
mm,
end-to-end finance business partnering.
yeah, absolutely. It's a great point to finish, Ash. Just to recap the 3 points. So, firstly, we started off with the age-old question: why do finance and operations in the business kind of battle with each other? And we started off. Our first point was we need to encourage and educate our finance personnel in our teams to show the business and tell them the story of the business through the numbers that they're showing them. So if we're not doing that, then we're not doing our job well. Our second point was to connect and build bridges between the finance team and the operations teams by creating conversation, by sitting in those businesses, and by communicating to them effectively in diplomatically. And the third point was to actually be a part of those businesses. So sit in those meetings, have conversations, and don't be standoffish. Have I covered that well, Ash? Anything I've missed? Any final golden nuggets you'd like to give?
No. That's you nailed it right on the head. So I think from us is what's been your approaches for successful business partnering? What's actually worked for you guys? What's not worked for you guys? And how have you learned it as well? How did you learn it the way that Kevin and I did, was turn up to your first job and go, get this done? And then we slowly had to fumble our way through a pre world of AI. Whereas now you've got someone you can chat to about this, but we had to learn this on the fly. And we had to get exposed really quickly and figure out going, okay, why am I getting told off every spreadsheet that I open up, and why aren't people understanding these 12 different tabs that I'm showing, right? So all the way to, hey, that doesn't actually pass the pub test. What do we need to be doing differently? So
yeah, that's a great way to finish it off. So I encourage you guys to chuck it in the comments if you have other ways. And also, if you were going to coach someone in your team, what would you do to help them think in this lens? I encourage you to also like and subscribe this channel. We've just been told as well, next year we'll be speaking at the Accounting and Business Expo. Again, we're looking for topics. We'll share kind of the themes over the next couple of weeks as well. Encourage you guys to help us brainstorm some topics that'll be useful to you guys. I know we'll be recording one of those episodes as well. But as always, thank you for listening to the Account Dads, the podcast for finance and accounting leaders, strategizers, thinkers, and doers. Have a great week, guys, and we'll see you on the next episode.